Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the AWE Digital Wellness Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mark Ritter, alongside with Christian Dominique. And our special guest today is Tracey Goodwin. Tracey is a coach, speaker, ADHD expert, author. I could go on, right? There's a long list of accomplishments. But the topic today that we're talking about is ADHD, which is very prevalent. A lot of people who work in the tech industry, they are very aware of the distractions, having too many tabs open, messages, emails, all those things. We have a lot of people who are tuned in today, a lot of people who are curious about what is ADHD, how can we use it as a leadership advantage, what is neurodivergence, what are all these things? So Tracey, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to speak with you.
I'm so happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Tracey, could you just tell us, how did you get into, go down this path, ADHD as your expertise and start coaching leaders with ADHD?
Yeah, so it started off back early in my career. I was teaching high school. And what I loved about teaching high school was just the curiosity that students would have. And then it just so happened after school, I'd have a room like packed with high school kids just kind of hanging out. And then when I got to know them a little bit more, they were hanging out usually because they were having some kind of challenge and either needed to talk it out or needed study skills help. And the more I learned about them, I'm like, something's going on here that is like causing them to have a challenge. And they're also so incredibly interesting. I want to learn more. It ended up, I would guess now, because this was many years ago, that they probably, most of them had ADHD, not necessarily diagnosed. That just got my brain going of, I need to learn more about this. So the graduate work that I did was in leadership in schools, but it was a close look at how we all learn so differently and how we can help students that learn differently. And that then just set me on a whole different path of just doing a really deep dive into why there's so much conflict, how we can communicate better. If our brains are all working differently, we got to figure out how to do things differently. And that led me to working with neuropsychologists locally where I live, getting more and more training, and then just really focusing in on ADHD specifically, starting off with children and families, running a business, and then that quickly evolved into working more and more with adults with ADHD, and specifically a lot of lawyers with ADHD.
Wow. So ADHD is one of those terms that kind of gets thrown around like depression, like, oh, I'm so depressed, right? It's almost overused nowadays. A lot of people are watching this. They might have self prescribed or diagnosed themselves with ADHD, right? Without actually having to run to a psychiatrist. When you were working with those kids, with those students, what were some of the telltale signs, that something wasn't quite, it was a little bit off with the way that they were learning? How would you, like, looking back, you say that it's likely that they had ADHD. How could one tell? How could one know?
It's such a good question. One of the biggest things that I noticed right away is there would be students telling me they were so bored. They were so bored and they didn't feel challenged, except they couldn't necessarily move into more challenging coursework because they weren't turning in homework, or, they'd open their backpack and it was like stuff flying everywhere. But I knew they were brilliant. They had such creative ideas, and there was such a disconnect when I saw that. I'm like, this does not make sense. So then it could be encouraging a student, let's see about you taking a really challenging class, and because you're super interested in it, and let's see what happens. And every single time that student did incredibly well, doing more difficult, challenging work in an interest area. than they were doing previously in a class that they thought was boring.
So
That
if I
was an
can,
immediate like, whoa, that something's going on here in the brain.
if I can add to the discussion, there's quite a few studies that link ADHD or ADD with the giftedness spectrum as well, something that a lot of psychologists, psychotherapists are not so aware of. So
Yes.
we're talking about people with high intellect and high potential that feel bored. I think the word that you mentioned is very adequate. And there's many people that can react to a school environment that might be rigid, that might talk about things that don't interest them. And I think you keyed into a very important point, which is intention, passion, and purpose, right? So I have an 8 piece framework that include perseverance, passion, and purpose. And when you have those three aligned, people can be very attentive to a task, right? So we're talking about attention deficit, but actually, if you create this environment, you can have very focused attention and very good result, including creativity. That's also a trait that we know that ADHD symptoms can or cannot have. And again, at our digital wellness, we're always trying to talk about, symptoms or spectrums and a dynamic view of mental health. A lot of people are just wanting to diagnose and prescribe and saying you have ADHD or you don't. That's not the point. It's to know that we have a neurodiversity, and it's always a spectrum.
Yeah, it's such an important point because I think a lot of people get lost in this idea that something either applies to them or it doesn't because we're looking at it in a black and white, not like this, exactly like what you said. It's a whole spectrum. And anyone listening in, there might be something that resonates with you and it doesn't with someone else with the same diagnosis or thought of the diagnosis because it shows up so differently. I mean, we're all different, so it would make sense. It's not going to look identical person to person, and it's also not going to get expressed identically in the world. I mean, it's just not.
So, a lot of people like I said, they're watching, they might think they have ADHD. What sort of frameworks or environments could lead to somebody with ADHD just struggling and just not doing well?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, it looks different to different person to person. I can think of 5 different clients, maybe 2 of them do great when they're in an environment where there's actually people around and that noise, that sound is helping them focus. I know people who they need silence. They need to be in a place that there is nothing on the walls, there's nothing anywhere. And then someone else who says, that sounds terrifying because then I'm in my head the entire time thinking of things that, are going in a bunch of different directions. So the key is really to think for yourself, what does my brain actually need? And think about that in a way that isn't full of judgment, where you're not looking at the person next to you or your neighbor or someone that you've run into and you're thinking, why can't I do it the way they can? Because when we do that, we just get stuck in that cycle of I'm trying to fix something when there's nothing to be fixed. It's just matching up what's going to be most helpful for you. I mean, certainly, I think most people would agree if you're in an environment and there's chaos everywhere, that's pulling a thread of your energy to each of those things. That's going to be difficult for anyone to operate in. And definitely, I would say not ideal for an ADHD brain. But there is that spectrum in what the environment looks like and feels like for the person.
I totally agree. And I would add, when you mentioned about 2 out of 5 clients and others and the specifics and knowing. So A also stands for AWE, awareness, wellness, and enjoyment. And awareness is always the first part. If you're aware of your surrounding, if you're aware of yourself, if you're aware of your differences, you're much more able to create those environments that are right for you, right? And it could be physical environment, it could be mental environment. and all those will lead to success in leadership, in school, in academics, in sports. So thanks for bring that up as a very good point for the audience. So increased awareness will allow you to choose. And then, the last part of ours, enjoyment, right? So we want
Yes.
people to enjoy what they're doing, enjoy if they're with colleagues, or enjoy their silence. And when you have that extra enjoyment in your life, in your working space, things become easier and better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So much easier. And that part often gets lost too. Like, we are supposed to be enjoying ourselves. There is supposed to be fun into the like rapid pace that everything is moving in right now. And that often gets lost, where people will tell me, like, I just haven't had any fun or found any enjoyment in a really long time. And they're consumed with this constant, like, trying to figure out their brain or trying to catch up. And it's so difficult. It's so difficult for so many people. So for people, like you said, listening in, that they're not sure if they have ADHD, like, you really want to think of quality of life and how much are these things impacting you? Like, when you feel like your mind is racing, or you're late all the time and you've tried every possible thing. I mean, that has an impact on the quality of your life. And if you've tried a bunch of things and they're not working and you don't have a diagnosis, it could be time for you to take a closer look at what's going on, so you can understand that awareness piece of what's actually happening in your mind.
I wanted to add also, you mentioned, looking at what other people do. I actually had a client yesterday, a coaching client, and she was, very upset looking at other people's social media and saying, I'm not at that stage, I'm lesser than, I'm comparing myself to others. And even had, some difficulty relationship with her sister because of that, right? So it's always a comparison. And, just wanted to help people in the audience to, not compare yourself to anyone. You are special, you're okay, you're fine, you're enough. You're at this part of your life, and you can have, other goals, but you're good now. And second, especially with social media, don't believe what's on social media. Everyone wants to put the best out of themselves, but it's not reality. That's what we talk about at AW as well. Like this train that especially the younger people at school, looking at social media and wanting to become, even teenagers are trying to become adults, right? I had the situation where there was a teenage romance, and the girl was expecting the boy to have money and to impress her like he was an adult, because that's what she's watching in social media, right? So this whole comparison thing is not useful, and you don't have to do that. You should not do that. Just compare yourself to the best you are today, and grow in that direction.
Yeah, it's such a good point of that, like, getting sucked away into comparison, or whether it's social media or going down different rabbit holes. And the ADHD brain, I always think of it, it's like sticky, and it experiences everything more intensely. So when you're comparing yourself, your brain, you're on overload of that comparison now. Like, it is going really, really deep and can feel so intense and painful. So it's a really important factor to take a look at, into like your client you were talking about. Take a look at, if it's upsetting, well, let's think about it.
Exactly.
So you said before, right, a lot of people who are wondering if they have ADHD, or who do know for in fact that they do have ADHD, should ask themselves, what does my brain actually need? And let me play devil's advocate for a moment here, but
Yeah.
a lot of people might ask themselves that question. They might be stumped. They might not know. They're like, I don't know what my brain actually needs. Like, I've been doing this thing for so long, this boring thing, bringing in the bills, paying the bills, bringing in the money to pay the bills. And I've just, life is just a constant churn, and this is difficult. And I don't know. How can somebody go about understanding what it is that their brain actually needs, if asking themselves that question is not providing like a concrete answer?
Yeah. So I like to use the idea of thinking of ourselves like a battery. And if you can ask yourself, first off, where is my power today? What's the percentage, 0 to 100?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you're below 100, those are power leaks. They're things that are taking your attention away. So to take that idea and to do a brain dump, and a brain dump, I consider anything you just take out of your head and you put on paper, or you leave yourself a voice memo and put down what those leaks are. That will tell you what your brain needs, because those are the things that are draining you, which means there's got to be a different way. Go ahead.
So I want to ask about that. So you're taking the activities that you do throughout the day and you're auditing that, and you're looking at what activities drain me of energy and what activities give me energy. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
And if someone listening in is like, whoa, that sounds like a lot, I don't even have time to sit down and do that. You don't have to go a full day of an audit if that feels overwhelming. You can take 3 minutes right after you're done listening here and think to yourself, what's my percentage right now? And then ask yourself, okay, so if it's not 100, what are the things that are taking that away? So it can be a quick self-assessment for you to think about. That's one thing someone can do.
I think that's a great strategy, and thanks for sharing, Tracey. In terms of, for instance, extroversion and introversion, we know that the correct definition of introversion and extroversion is not being social or not social. It is how a social interaction gives you or drains your energy, right? So, and we can talk about the concept of ambivert, which is, most people, again, it's a spectrum. There's no people that are completely extrovert, although some people have told me that I am, but I love people more than most. They give me energy. I'm having energy now talking to you guys. But there's not really extreme extrovert or introvert. They're more in between. And you need both time of silence and time with people. And if you can audit your energy, and also at AWE, we help people manage their energy for performance, athletes, leaders, and as well, creatives and whatnot. Just knowing and managing that energy is very important for your productivity and for your well-being. So it's, and as you said, it doesn't have to be a full audit, but just realizing, is this activity draining or giving me energy? And it might be different from one day to the other, right?
It could.
One day this activity might be giving you energy, and the other day, today is draining, right? So just to have that awareness again, and it doesn't have to be a full audit with an Excel sheet and all that, but just to talk about it and to think about it is very useful. And just as a funny story, my son, when he was 6, 7 years old, used to talk to me in those terms, right? Oh, Dad, I think I have 30% battery now, so we can do a few more things, but then I'm going to be sleepy. Right?
I love it.
I have 55. Oh, that low battery, Dad, right? So
yes, it's so good. And you're bringing up another good point of, there's also the things that we need, and like water, like food, like some movement and sleep. And sometimes for people with ADHD, and again, it's a spectrum, but there are some people who it's like not knowing their threshold for when they need to insert eating, or you could go all day and not have had no water. Those kind of things, when you want to think about what does my brain need, you want to take a look and start noticing, what is going on there, because those things will impact what's happening for your brain.
That's why I always have water nearby.
Yeah, it's really important, and it's one of those things that can be easily forgotten. But when you think about, we're talking about leveraging your brain. So if you're going to leverage your brain, you have to make sure that there's some of the basic things that are easily forgotten are taken care of. Because if they're not, you can't get to that genius part. At least you can't get to it as often as you want to.
Mm-hmm. So that brings us, it's a nice transition into the next point with the title of this podcast today is Make ADHD Your Genius, right? Neurodivergence as a, superpower. I talked to you briefly before the podcast, right? People with ADHD, we hear about them all the time. We have the Richard Bransons, who are the famous ADHD entrepreneurs who go on to found Virgin Media and these huge companies, right? And you hear this term being thrown around. ADHD is a superpower. I'll share a quick story before I get to the question. So I was at a Tony Robbins conference in December, and I met somebody, and I shared with him I have ADHD, and he looks at me and he says, "You are so lucky." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "You are so lucky that you have ADHD. You have this unlimited amount of energy that I could never have." And I looked at him like he was insane. I was like, "Are you kidding me? This thing has been like a burden for me my entire life." And I was like, I couldn't fathom how somebody could say this was lucky, right? And I even shared this with a client of mine recently. I said, ADHD can be a superpower. I got the same reaction, frustration. How can you call it, almost like as if this were a pejorative, like an insult, right? How can you call this a superpower, right?
Yes.
Tracey, how can somebody with ADHD call this a superpower? And how do they unlock the superpower potential of having ADHD?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I don't typically use superpower as the language, for the reason you just said. Also because it's like otherworldly in my mind, and that feels really difficult anyway. And I do think there's a problem with tossing that around like you're lucky. The challenges with ADHD and finding your genius and using your genius, and the challenges of ADHD run parallel. It's not, oh, this is great, you have a genius like no other, and just go do what your genius is all day and life will be great. There's the challenge that runs side by side. I see it as, if your mind is capable of hyperfocus in an interest area, and you are able to get that self-awareness. My framework includes a deep dive into the subconscious mind and what's been running since you were a child. And 3, building your executive functioning skills, figuring out how to delegate and get support where you need it. That's when I think you get to live more and more in that space of genius. So for me, I'm on a mission to help people do that, or at least start thinking about how they can do it so that it feels like a possibility. Because I get to witness it all the time, that when people start shifting a few different things, like they're understanding deeply, they're clearing out old stories that have been there for a really long time that make them feel awful, and they're building a skill set, I think then you do get to leverage that unique brain, which we do see all the time, whether it's athletes or, like you mentioned, CEOs, musicians, creatives. There is something pretty special happening there. It doesn't, though, mean that it's not painful and challenging while you're in that process of figuring it out.
Yeah. Sorry, Christian, I just have one more thought, because again, I'm sorry, this is a very interesting podcast for me today, and I am full of questions. It seems like what you're saying, those two things run in parallel, as you said. It's like a fine blade, and on the one side of the blade, you have people who have used this to their advantage, but on the other side, right, it can become an extremely serious disadvantage to a lot of people who suffer incredibly because of it. And it seems like in today's day and age, modern digital technology is conditioning us in a way to become more distracted than ever, which is why somebody with ADHD might struggle more nowadays than they would have perhaps 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? Starting a business. And so if this person grows up inundated with media, with images, with distractions, they go down the path of being extremely distracted and falling to bad habits and reaching that level of using ADHD as an advantage, just something that's just so far gone and difficult to reach, right?
Yeah.
Would
And I think
yeah.
on top of that, when you're bringing up the digitalness of it, of getting that information so quickly all the time, and then you throw on the comparing, and now that's been happening since childhood. Yeah, it's like it's deeply embedded, this way your brain is operating. I don't believe that it is not possible for anyone to step into this genius. I do feel so strongly about it. And like you said, it's figuring out what those challenges are. I mean, when you think about the Olympics that we just had and athletes talking about having ADHD, no, they each talked about it in such an interesting way of like, for some, surprises and challenges being a dopamine producer in their brain, or talking about the supports that they've had around them. You know, people stepping into their genius are also not doing it in isolation.
Yeah.
They're doing it with a support and learning from people like yourselves and having tools, actual tools that help with what you're all doing with digital wellness is so important.
A lot of the points that you just mentioned are coming in, and I know you've written on the subject. As I was doing research, first of all, also this week I met another ADHD specialist, so we're going to have a guest on a later podcast that you can join. So we'll talk more about this awesome subject. It will be our third ADHD podcast because it's a really important subject. You know, about 10% of U.S. children currently have ADHD diagnosed. So, and there's more in the spectrum as we're talking about. And unfortunately, it's getting higher because of digital distractions and other things. But I just wanted to pull out a study that I found. It's a PhD thesis, I think from a French university. If the marketing team want to pull it out, it talks about looking at ADHD from strain to strength, right? So exactly what we're mentioning. Why is it a superpower? Why is it, you know, a genius when I'm feeling it's a strain? And how can we go from this idea of strain to strength? So you know, the paper I will share in the notes. We're not able to have it on the screen, but it is a PhD thesis that looks at exactly all the factors that we talked about. It mentions the adaptive ability of the ADHD brain. So when you're talking about, some people are happy that there's something that is surprising, and that's an ability that you can use as leadership, right? So you have a more adaptable brain, flexible, creative, and that might fuel you to help a team as a leader. It also talks exactly about structural support. So support, relationship, real connections, accountability, and it's drawing on Good's 1960 framework about structural support. It also talks about mothers specifically. So we're talking about women leadership. ADHD is underdiagnosed for women and for at all age. And to understand how it might affect you specifically, and also if you're raising children with ADHD, what you can learn from that, and how can that affect the workplace. And it looks at three core themes. One is guiding with grit, loving with intention. Again, intention, attention, passion. The other theme is strength in every step, wisdom in every choice. And the last one is leading with heart, driving with purpose. So again, the heart, passion, purpose, perseverance, all part of the 8P frameworks that we use at AWE. And also the last one, compassion, which is part of the 7 C's framework of connection, compassion, curiosity, creativity, all things that the ADHD symptoms, brain, or superpowers can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it just goes back to when we can tap into those things and feel like in your heart those things, that to me is where it just becomes like wide open. It's limitless, someone's potential. And all of us, ADHD or not, we're equipped with so many tools within ourselves, like our breath, that we don't often access. So sometimes it can feel like we're chasing this thing to again, like fix something or make it better, where there's a lot of clues and knowledge that everyone listening, you have within you. And it's okay to get support and help and ask questions. And again, that idea of not being compassionate to yourself or feeling so isolated and scared because everything you've tried in the past hasn't worked. You may not have found yet the thing that works. And there's so many options available. And again, the work, that both you and I are doing is where people can start experiencing that shift and change.
And we're so thankful for the work that you're doing and have been doing. Can you tell us a bit about what you've found out, what you wrote, what some of the frameworks that you think might be useful as well?
Yeah, whether my experience was working with children or adults, it's always the same description and conversation that my clients will give me. Like when I first started out, I'd have kids draw a picture of their brain. And it didn't matter what it looked like. They could just draw a picture. 99% of the time, their picture would include some kind of like part of their brain arguing with the other side. That like ADHD kind of pull of like, I'm being pulled in this direction and I have this little voice telling me, no, come on back, and a constant back and forth. So understanding that is happening and that awareness piece in my framework is number one. Like you just have to also understand like, okay, this is what my brain does. And it's okay that my brain does this. I know it doesn't feel good, so I'm going to figure out what I need to change or learn. So, and I see that in most frameworks, that I take a look at. That awareness piece is huge. You can't skip it. You just can't. And the second thing is that I noticed over time, again, children through adults, is just this feeling of feeling shame and guilt that you're not doing something that you're seeing someone else around you do. And that part to me is really where work needs to happen, where we can kind of think about, at some point we made some little decision in our mind that we were going to either believe something about ourselves or the world. And then it's like a snowball, and it just like snowballs over and over. And now we're in a place where it feels like, well, I don't know what to do. I've struggled with this for years and years. Like, I guess I'm just not good at that. Like, I'm not good at getting things done. I'm not good at planning. I'm not good at prioritizing. So to be able to kind of go back and release some of that, because it's stuck in our head and it's stuck in our bodies, is really important. And
well,
then
I think if we think about it, as you mentioned, like as in switching the narrative in your brain and in society from problems to potential, right?
yeah,
So what's the potential that there is? What are the things that we're not seeing and that we can uncover together, right?
exactly. And then that third piece, is figuring out, okay, if there's some challenges that I'm experiencing, is there a skill set I need to work on? So now if you've got the awareness, you're working on some of these limiting beliefs that have been there for a really long time. And now you are working on the skill set, or maybe it's communication so that you can delegate effectively. Maybe it's your boundaries start to look different because maybe you need a 15-minute walk in the middle of the day and you haven't been able to do it. Well, how can we make it happen? Then we're able to start thinking about what are the skills you want to be building for yourself and which ones are, I'm doing it just good enough. I'm going to get support from someone around me to help fill in these gaps. And I think that those three things together are like a holistic way of thinking about ADHD and helping people spend more time in that genius area. I mean, we're human, so none of us are perfect and we're going to have these challenges, but the more we can sit in that place of it feels so much better in this other place, why not do everything we can do collectively to help ourselves get there and help other people get there?
And I love that nuance. It is like ADHD is your genius, but it doesn't mean that you have to be a genius 24/7. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be challenges. It's not like setting an expectation that's not realistic. It is you have this neurodivergent brain, and we can talk about autism, and we can talk about giftedness and other, different brain types. Every brain is different. We know that, right?
Yes.
And how can you use things that we know about a specific type of brain or some traits that we can see as potential, and then we want to have that genius aspect as often as we can in the day, in the week. But there'll be days that are going to be more difficult, and that's it. And if you need to take a walk or if you need to delegate, like you mentioned, you can have the awareness to do it and the tools to do it.
Yeah. And I think you both mentioned this earlier. The awareness that it might look different day to day is a very real experience for people with ADHD, that you can have the best laid out plan or think you've finally nailed like when you're feeling energetic and when you're not. And something switches and it looks different and it feels like, oh, see, I can't like do this thing. Where maybe if we understand it and we have a short little menu of other options, it might start to get easier to be able to shift, and shifting is an executive functioning skill. So it's not surprising that this can be a difficult piece.
Do you see any, you talked about building the skills after you overcome the limiting beliefs. Do you see any similar, and you said that every person is unique in their own way. Do you see any similar frameworks that do work amongst lots of people with ADHD? Similar, where could somebody start practically speaking with a new schedule, routine, time management schedule, things that they can do practically that might work if they have ADHD?
That's a great question. One of the things that I see consistently being helpful is habit stacking or habit pairing, where you take some kind of ritual that you already have in your life. Like it could be having coffee, it could be when you shower. I mean, it could be anything. And you add onto it something that you're trying to get yourself to do. So if it's you want to have a new journaling practice, maybe your journal is next to where your coffee cup is or your coffee maker is, or you're trying to remember to bring your lunch with you to work. So maybe your keys are going to be with your lunch. It's putting two things together. One is the thing that you naturally do, and two is the new thing you're trying to build in. That can work really well for people because it can just make more sense in their mind. It's not adding on an additional piece to their schedule. It's pushing two things together. So I really like that, and it tends to work well for most people. And it is not trying to do it all at once for everything in your life. Pick one thing you want to start doing differently and figure out where you can attach this thing into something you're already doing without thinking.
I love it. It's stacking. It's working with something that's already been in your daily habits. My only question, Tracey, is people still have time to shower? Because I don't even have. I should take a shower. You just reminded me that. No. Yeah. So let's stack with things that people are doing. I also wanted to talk about other things that burnout, imposter syndrome. How do you see, like, I think imposter syndrome might be very important for neurodivergent, and that's you're doing something and you think you're not good enough to do that. How can we help people build confidence, and also telling them it's okay if one day is not working, there's the next day.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome is definitely, it's so common, first of all. So if someone's listening and they're feeling like that's their experience and no one else really feels that way, most people have that experience at some point in time. Again, with ADHD, I think it's stickier. And what I mean by that is it like cements itself in there. So it can feel really intense. So number one, just acknowledging that this is okay that it's happening. And it's starting to look at what the limiting belief is. And you mentioned, like, is it, I don't feel like I'm good enough? Am I afraid I'm going to make a mistake? Am I a perfectionist? And so if I don't feel like I'm uber prepared, it's not going to go well. Those limiting beliefs, there's lots of layers to them. So they usually run really, really deep, where at some point in time, it could have been in school, it could have been at home, where we didn't feel good enough. And underneath that might even be, we were afraid if we didn't act a certain way, we weren't going to be loved, or there's so much to it. But for starters, we can just start questioning the thought. And we can ask ourselves, is it 100% true? Am I 100% certain that I am not good enough, smart enough, whatever? If we're not 100% true, there's some evidence in there that proves otherwise. So we can acknowledge that evidence, and that starts to help to fuel things a little bit. We can also, when we're in those situations, is also helping ourselves think about, who am I when I don't have that thought? So when I'm not fearful of whatever this thing is, how do I show up? Oh, well, I walk into the room and I'm standing a little taller, or, I'm talking more slowly, or whatever the thing is. And that is a powerful question that comes out of the work of Byron Katie. And she has like a 4-step process. And one of those questions is thinking about, like, oh, if I didn't have that thought, who would I be? And it's pretty empowering and liberating when you start thinking about it that way. It's like when you ask yourself that question, you're the only person who can answer it, because it's yourself. So it like puts this like pretty significant mindset shift in there when you think of it that way. Because if you can think about it and you get clear on who that is, that means it's possible for you, because you're imagining it.
So there's essentially 2 layers that you're describing. First one is, before you can even get started with all the practical implementations of systems, habits, all that stuff, you have to overcome, or not overcome, but rethink any limiting beliefs that you have because of the ADHD, right? If you think that my brain is broken, you can't even start with trying to change your life. So essentially, what you do is that you help establish what are the narratives first that are controlling somebody's life, and then examining whether that's actually true. Do we have evidence that that is 100% true? And if not, is there a more viable explanation here? And after you've done that, then you basically look at what new habits, systems can be implemented here to help take advantage and make that ADHD the genius then.
Exactly. And when we take a look at those limiting beliefs, I'm trained in a protocol where we go
Mhm.
through, 8 different steps of really clearing it out, because we're holding it in our bodies. So there's also this other piece of, we can think of, I'm going to shift my thinking, and that's really, really important. And it's also being able to just it's like clearing out old dirt or old
Right.
whatever that you've been carrying around. And once
Mhm.
that happens, it's pretty amazing that the mind opens up and is actually able to implement some of the tools that our listeners, people listening in, probably already have. Because we usually have lots of these tools, and the frustrating thing is, like, why can't I get myself to use them or do them or figure it all out?
Well, that reminds me of the client of yesterday. We did some breath work to create, some peace and calm and less rumination and presence. And we did it in session. It wasn't something a tool that you do that after and then, oh, I did, but I couldn't, right?
Yeah.
So doing things with them, showing how to do it, doing it with them, co-regulating, really helpful. And then also explaining how to remove those thoughts, how to change them in a way that works, right? Because
Yes.
more than 70% of people say that they know what to do to have a better life, but they're not doing it. More than 70, right? So
Yeah.
people have the information, but it's and that's why you need coaches to help you be accountable and to show you how to do it, right? So thanks for your work and your words today. Very useful.
You're so welcome.
There is this theory that I've been playing around with for a little bit, and I think also on LinkedIn right now there's a viral clip going around of Dr. Russell Barkley. He's a famed neuropsychologist, and he's talking about ADHD and why boys with ADHD, or I guess anyone who kids who have ADHD, get addicted to video games. Is that the video game?
Uh-oh.
I am back again. I'm back again. That video games simulate natural consequences, and they make the experience so enticing because there's a consequence to making a wrong decision in the video game. And normal life can become boring because when you're doing work, there's almost an absence of any real life consequences. Like there's no tiger jumping out at you. You're not in a war. There's no real skin in the game when you're in a classroom studying for things. So there's no real, I don't want to say to anybody watching this, like, okay, go put yourself in a war zone and then like get real skin in the game if you want to activate your ADHD. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is there perhaps this inundation with social media, working behind a computer, all these jobs going to work, there is an absence of real skin in the game and playing it safe, lack of risk that makes life seem very dull and boring because people are also afraid of taking the risk. So they're caught essentially in a trap between not taking the risk and being bored and also being afraid, right, of taking the risk in the first place, right?
Yes.
And the consequences, and that is where a lot of the pain can come from for people.
Yeah, I agree. Especially that fear place. Absolutely.
And
It's
if we want
extremely-
to go back a bit to the, imposter syndrome, I would always say, like, the fact that you're doing it, there's this expression like, fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you're doing it is already a good step in that, like, courage, right? Courage is also one of the 7 C's framework, and courage is part of the Stoics and other ideas that you can acknowledge the fear and then go beyond it, right? So it's not that you have to suppress the fear, you have to acknowledge it and know that, okay, we can go a little bit better. And that's also related to the flow theory, right? So the flow is your peak performance, and your peak performance is when your challenges is a little bit more than your competence. It doesn't match it perfectly. It's a little bit more, and that could be from 5 to 30%. So you want to be in that a little bit like stressful, positive stress. The positive stress is called stress. So you can have good cortisols and priming your body and mind to do something a bit more difficult, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and people that are in the imposter syndrome, which, as you mentioned, is not just ADHD, it's most people, a little bit more women than men, but in general, both have a lot of imposter syndrome many times during months and years. It's something that comes back, right? So when you're in the imposter syndrome, see it as a positive thing. It means you're doing something that's a bit more challenging, and you can go through it, and then you can teach yourself to see evidence of other times where you had an imposter syndrome, and then you became that or more than you were afraid you were not, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. This is making me think also, and what we were talking about with the fear, or maybe there's no skin in the game kind of idea, is in order for growth to happen, there has to, just like you were talking about, there has to be this little bit of inner resistance of like, I'm not sure if I should do this. I don't know what's happening now. Like that can be a sign that it's time for a change.
Right.
And I do think there's, just like people tuning in and in the work that you're doing together, this idea of community, I think, is really important as well. I have a group coaching program running right now, and it's incredible to see what these people just get from each other's wins. Just seeing one person do just a little bit of what feels stretchy, and whether or not it works, the fact they took the step, it's so energizing for other people around them. So I think it's also really important for people to be figuring out like who can they be talking to about these things, or what programs can they be joining, or how can they be surrounding themselves with, that saying of like the 5 people you surround yourself with, are basically like a mirror of what's happening for you, really thinking about that. And if you're feeling just kind of where you are, well, what could you step into that you're going to be fueled by the people around you versus feeling that drain?
Thanks for your example of community. And community has been at the center of our work at AWE, building communities, building bridges, communication. Might it be with NGOs, schools, corporations, psychologists, coaches, youth, right? So all those communities can get together and share. And I really appreciate the fact that it's not only about sharing wins as in results, it's also about overcoming, showing courage, and doing, right? When you show action, then positive action can be cumulative and can spread, right?
Absolutely. And when we're thinking about make ADHD your genius, that takes an enormous amount of courage. In order to step into anything different than what you're doing means it's a risk. Like, we don't know what's going to happen when we take the next step. And I know from my work in the field of ADHD that there is so much courage in the people that I work with and see, and that needs to be celebrated, because sometimes people either aren't feeling that way themselves, or they don't understand it's part of the picture. And I see it in every conversation I have, is there's so much courage and that resilience of taking the next step.
As you mentioned, courage is contagious, and we encourage it. So if anyone wants to have any comments or question on the chat, now would be a good time to say that we're all crazy, or that we don't know what we're talking about.
It's very possible.
or have some comments and questions. We're here to also create that community feeling and engaging with the audience that take the time to listen live. If you're watching later, you can also reach Tracey or ourselves if you didn't have the chance to contribute live to this talk today.
Mm-hmm. I think something, while we wait for questions to come in, something that both of you had said, Christian, you said that the challenge, something that's a little bit beyond your own capabilities, right? What was the name? Stress or going to something?
Stress, yeah.
Stress,
Stress
yeah.
is the physiological response.
Essentially, and I think the psychologist from your country, Christian Jordan Peterson, he puts it very eloquently, is that the challenge, it's like a journey, an adventure that presents itself to you, and it's a calling, right? Called to the adventure. And a lot of people are in the habit of ignoring the call out of fear, right? And
Yes.
avoidance. But that call could actually bring about an experience that would be very exciting for them, that would perhaps help activate this genius, right? If they weren't stuck in the same habits. So essentially what both of you are describing is a habit of avoidance of discomfort, avoidance of fear, avoidance of uncertainty, right? And
Absolutely.
the calling, the life will always be beckoning this in saying, trying to give you the same message until you learn the lesson. And that calling will be there, and continually, if you decide to ignore it, I think that will cause a lot of frustration in a lot of people.
Yeah, you mentioned avoidance. Avoidance is something that we work a lot with the ACT, Acceptance Commitment Therapy Framework, which is kind of a more modern version of CBT. So most therapists are still using CBT, and most chatbot and stuff are based on CBT. But we try to use ACT and CCT here to upgrade kind of what we can do. And one of the things we always talk about is, what are you avoiding and why? And how can we stop those avoidance patterns, right? So thanks for bringing that up. It is a common theme in almost every client is those avoidance strategy or avoidant habits and what leads to them. Also wanted to kind of talk about kind of the masking. Oh, and by the way, Jordan Peterson, love him, but it's not my country. It's just the country I was born in, and I live here still. I'm a proud Canadian, but I don't like to identify as one thing or one country.
Okay.
So just wanted to put, and I challenge my friends and everyone that knows me that it's like, is it really your country? Do you own it, or what? Why is it your country?
Hello, North American, my North American friends. We're all North Americans here.
Yeah. So in terms of like imposter syndromes and in avoiding, maybe Tracey can enlighten us about like what do you describe, or have you seen like masking behavior? And I assume like people putting masks on or pretending, right? Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. Yes. I see it all the time. I would call myself like a professional masker for a very long time. Mine was related more to anxiety and just holding it all in, whatever it is. Lots and lots of people, and our people tuning in, are masking, are holding it all together for a variety of reasons. It can be people-pleasing reasons. It can be, I'm really afraid of, if I let this down, I'm not going to be accepted. It could be survival mode. It could be, I'm going to lose my job if I actually start letting people know what's really going on. And it is an incredible burden to carry that around. And when we think again of, we're all trying to help people move into this place where they're feeling better, when we're masking, it's extremely draining. It is taking most of your energy to keep that going, which then lends itself to less cognitive energy to be able to think and do and plan and prioritize and all of those executive functioning skills. So oftentimes this is where coaching or community support can help with figuring out, well, I'm pretty scared here, so what am I going to do about this masking? And it depends on the person. Masking can be so deeply embedded and really have to layer upon layer be kind of taken apart. For other people, it might be, okay, I'm going to like put some, maybe I'm going to change my environment around in my office. And there's going to be some things that people maybe aren't expecting, or I'm going to start wearing headphones because that helps me focus. That can be like taking your mask down a little bit and a lower risk. So taking that apart is, again, where we started in the conversation, going to look different person to person, but it's really, really important that we do that for ourselves and are also supportive of just people everywhere. I mean, a smile can help someone lower their mask a little bit. This doesn't have to be complicated in even how we're supporting others.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for also demystifying, destigmatizing. Everyone is pretty much doing that at some point, or most times. Everyone's masking. That's the part of the social construct that, we don't want to be vulnerable to others. We don't want to express everything. And there's some good reason for that.
Yes.
But the more you're aware of that masking behavior, I always say, I love the masquerades, maybe at Halloween and another private party, but not every day, right? We don't have to wear a mask all the time. And I also want to demystify for the audience. Some people think that taking the mask off means finding your authentic self or being authentic. So I'm challenging always this idea that you hear on social media, because find your inner self, be authentic. But what is that, and is it not dynamic, right? So I'm actually writing my third book called "Don't Be Authentic, Pay Attention," and it talks about how like paying attention is more important than pretending that you're authentic. It's like, be in the moment, be present. And that's also what we do on our digital reset. So we have a Patreon and a free resets on Tuesday to help people be in the moment, to feel it in their body. We talked about embodiment, action, and with breathing exercise, with visualization and storytelling, we try to get people to the level that they don't need to define themselves as a Canadian, an American, a German, or as authentic. They just need to really pay more attention. And that's what we're talking about in ADHD, right? Less attention.
Yes.
When you have more attention, everything else becomes clearer and easier.
Yes. I love that. I can't wait for that book.
So I'm working hard on it when I have time, but I need to shower sometimes as well. So.
That's important.
So I think we are talking about ADHD, and there might be some parents who are watching this podcast right now, this live stream. One of the more contentious issues in our modern culture is the idea of medicating children who have ADHD. A lot of parents are against it. For full disclosure, none of us are psychiatrists. We are not endorsing any type of medication here. We're not prescribing any medication, but we are still have the capacity and ability to talk about medicating children, right? And perhaps the long-term consequences of that. Has this come up with you at all, parents who are concerned about their children and the decision that they might need to make, whether they should medicate their children or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it goes back to that individual idea. I've definitely worked with families and parents who, were scared. They were concerned. They were afraid for a variety of reasons. Will this change my child? Will their personality be different? Side effects, do these things really work? And I think you really, really have to feel like you can trust and that you have a good relationship for whoever is prescribing. Parents and their children need to be in a conversation together with real, factual information. There's so much information everywhere, and there's misinformation, and there's a million different viewpoints. And it is not, from my perspective, a quick decision. It's not the only decision. If someone's being told this is the only way, it's to ask your questions and go with your gut instinct on this for parents. Parents really have to do their own research, but alongside their child, it has to be a together kind of conversation with someone that you really trust and value their opinion and their expertise.
And again, we're not giving medical advice, but we also want to make sure that people have alternative and know that there are alternatives that work. I was dealing with a client that had seen 2 doctors, not about ADHD, it was about sleeping disorder. And the client told me I was not listened to. I was prescribed sleeping pills. That's not working, right? So there's often it's a systemic approach that we should have. It's a holistic approach, right? And
Yes.
medication could help. Medication could help in ADHD and sleeping. It's not, we're not against tech, we're not against medication, but we always want to see what's the other picture. What are the relationship? What are the stress? What is the imposter syndrome? What is the financial stress? What is the why is the person not sleeping or not being able to concentrate at work, right? So going a bit deeper than just saying there's one solution, I think is wrong. And parents and individuals should make their own decisions based on broader information and trying different things out and seeing if they work or not.
Definitely. Because like you said, there's so many, this isn't a one size fits all kind of situation. And there's so many different options. And what I do always recommend for people is trying everything all at the same time makes it really difficult to pull apart like what is actually helping in this situation.
Yeah.
And it can, and especially I think for parents, just desperately wanting to help their child, it can feel like I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and we're going to do it all at the same time. And then either not finding success or being really confused on what's actually helping can be really difficult and make the situation feel more stressful.
And we had Dr. Matika, now a good friend who is a psychiatrist in the US. And I don't know if it's his country or not. He didn't tell me, but he lives there. And he's actually in some national boards about psychiatry. And he was mentioning that a lot of parents don't even know, or individuals don't even know what the outcome of the medication is, right? So as you mentioned, Tracey, it should be a longer discussion and decision. And the first question would be, what do I even want from this medication? What's the outcome that I'm looking for? Or what do I want from meditation? Or what do I want from a structured, coaching? What's the goal? And then we can assess, is this working? Is this working individually? Or is those two things together amplifying as one work and we stack on some other tools? That's a question that people forget to ask. What do I want from this? What's my ultimate goal as a family, as an individual? And what can bring me to there, or even further, right? Once you go at least to the minimum, you realize, hey, it's not a problem. It's actually a trampoline to get me to other steps.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's such a good point. And from there to be able to then clearly track, are you reaching your goal? And knowing that you can reach your goals. Like there is a way to get there. There's a way to get there. So it doesn't just have to be like, oh, it's a little better. I'm a little better. I hear that a lot. Like it's working a little bit. So I guess that's good enough.
Yeah.
Is it good enough? Because there's this whole, and you've both talked about it, there's this whole other place that you can keep going to and stretching and growing. And it's really important to not lose sight of that.
And we've all seen the results, all three of us, right? So if you're doubting that you can reach goals that even you didn't imagine, we've seen people do it. So you can do it, everyone listening.
Yes.
Well, this has been very insightful conversation. I think a lot of people watching would have taken a lot of value out of this. Somebody who is watching who might think they have ADHD, ask themselves, do an audit of their day, understand what gives them the most energy in the day, what sort of activities. Then perhaps it might be a little more difficult to do this on your own, but really try to understand what the limiting beliefs are that will prevent somebody from actually moving forward in their life. And then after that, to really try to implement a system that includes habit stacking, taking things that you're already doing, like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, going outside in the morning to go grab a coffee, whatever it is, and adding on the thing that perhaps you've been avoiding, and whether you've been avoiding that because of fear or some other habit. Everything in life, you are a summation of your habits, right?
Yeah.
And regardless of whether you have ADHD or not, it can make it very difficult if you've gone down the slide of bad habits. And I think this is what our company was founded upon, the idea that we live in a day and age where we're inundated with technology that makes bad habits much more accessible than ever, which has put a lot of people in the modern world, especially children, teenagers, at a disadvantage.
Yeah, agreed.
Thanks, Mark.
And for people unsure of, that genius part, what is my genius even? Start thinking about what is it that you enjoy.
Yes.
And if you're feeling like nothing, well, what did you enjoy in the past? There's something you enjoyed at some point in time, or that sparked a little bit of a good feeling inside. Lean into that, because there's so much more there.
Right.
So much more.
And, just for anyone listening as well, you are heard, you are seen, and you are different, and everyone is, right? So if you think and feel differently, that's okay. Actually, that's great. Now that you know that, we can work with that. And like that neurodiversity is amazing. We have a lot of neurodiverse people in our team at AWE. We cherish them. Mark is one of them. I'm one of them. And we have others, and we can talk about those things and be honest about, we think and feel differently. We might react differently, but we want to actually not react. We want to respond. And that's one of the reasons why we created some of the products, including our Lumi and meditation and guided prompts for breathing. Medi is our AI for calm and breathing. And then Lumi is for habits, what we talked about, habits and happiness. So we have AI that can help you 24/7. We have real coaches that can help you go through that. And if you have any specific need, Tracey definitely talked about some group ADHD that seems very interesting that I would love to join. And where can we reach you, Tracey, and any listener that want to reach you on the internet?
Yeah, you can go to TraceyBromleyGoodwin.com. It's Tracey with an E. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Tracey Bromley Goodwin, or Instagram at Lessen the Overwhelm. And this has been such a pleasure talking with you two. It's been great.
Yes, thank you so much, Tracey, for joining us, and we look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Is there any final things that you would like the audience who's watching to take away from our talk today, our podcast?
Yeah, just to remember that change is possible. If you can just keep reminding yourself, it is possible for every single person out there,
regardless of age.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And I want to add, you don't have to keep fighting with your thoughts or fighting with yourself or with others. You can work with the situation that you have, with the brain that you have, with everything that you have right now. It's okay. And we can move forward with a smile. And if you're smiling now and smile to someone else, then you're courageous now. That's also contagious. So hopefully everyone will go in the day with that attitude, and reach out to us if we can help. And thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing everyone again next week on the next episode of the AWE Digital Wellness Podcast. This was Tracey Goodwin today. Thank you so much, Tracey, again. And we're wishing everyone a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks, Tracey.
Bye.